The government is trying to pass its industrial relations bill. It's relying on the Greens and at least one of Jackie Lambie or David Pocock. It seems there'll be at least a delay. In the interim, there's fierce debate over the merits of this legislation and to what extent it's needed. Joining me now is ACTU Secretary Sally McManus for more on this. Thanks very much for your time. I know it's a busy one at the moment. I suppose just starting on the issue itself, this is all about getting wages going. The September quarter suggested wages are going 3.1% growth. That's the highest since 2013. And that's obviously factoring in as well private sector growth even higher at 3.5%. So wages are beginning to go, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that's a huge real wage cut for everyone, obviously, because of where CPI is. And 3.1%, well, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it was just normal to have, 3.5% pay increases across the economy. And we're getting a 3.1% with everything going towards that. So really low unemployment, really high, cost of living pressures, all of those things, profits obviously going up and, productivity, people not seeing the benefits of that. So even with everything going the right way is 3.1%, which is still a huge wage cut. So it's not surprising it's gone up a little bit last period that it was measured, and that's because of the minimum wage increase that went through. And also you can see a small up in wage outcomes in bargaining, but they're not big, and it's not even where the Reserve Bank Governor said that his preferred area was 3.5%.
You mentioned it's because of the minimum wage rise that went through. The ABS actually suggests that was quite a small part. The biggest factor was individual agreements, individual workplace agreements. So don't they deserve to not be demonised if they were actually a much bigger factor in that pay increase compared to the minimum wage increase?
Oh, no one's demonising pay increases. We're, obviously happy with pay increases. Those ones that have been negotiated at the moment are still seeing pay increases of around, but probably a bit less with most of them anyway, at 3.5%. This is still just, low wage or normal wage growth in an unnormal time. So, I don't know how anyone could possibly say that the wage system is working where you're not even seeing, wage increases that are around 3.5% across the economy.
Well, in the private sector, they are that. The public sector is actually dragging it down. So that would theoretically be up to Labor governments. But the other factor on this, of course, is wages are always a lag factor. They don't go up overnight. They can't just suddenly soar up with inflation. A lot of agreements are updated, sporadically, every 1 year or 2 years. So they are starting to get going. We might be taking drastic action here for a problem that's not as drastic as we think it is.
I think the point is that even where you're seeing wage increases of 3.6% in EBAs, that there's very few EBAs these days. There's very few of them. So that's never going to be enough to lift it for everyone. Actually, one of the, what those statistics showed, it's actually individual contracts and once-off, amounts of pay rises that's more driving the once-off increases we're seeing at the moment. And that's not surprising given that you've had, employers say that they can't get workers, like they are putting up pay because of that reason, not because of the bargaining system.
But isn't that also because people just aren't joining unions? They haven't for many years. So if we're going to find a way for more people to get higher wages, is it really through something that's going to funnel people towards big agreements, CBAs and unions, when workers, private sector workers, have voted with their feet, haven't they? They're not joining unions.
Well, yes, it is part of the reason that we've seen a collapse in fairness and wage growth and all of those things, the collapse in union membership. Unfortunately, there's not anything in the bill before us that's going to change that. No one can, we negotiate agreements all the time. We also obviously do all the heavy lifting for the minimum wage increases, and people get those increases without being union members, and that's going to continue. With the laws that are in front of Parliament at the moment, it's really about giving workers options and a chance to be on a more level playing field. We are actually concerned that the concessions that the government's made to the business community are going to impede our ability to get those pay increases, but getting the laws through will make a difference, and that, doing necessary.
Sorry, Yeah, sorry, just jumping in. So on that, one of the concessions appears to be around the number of employees before someone's a small business, quote small business, is possibly forced into multi-employer bargaining. So the initial proposal was 15, which it's very low. It counts anyone, even if you're just working a few hours a week. Is it fair enough that bar's a little bit higher? Someone running a really small business, forcing them into negotiations and possibly the same deal as much bigger sized businesses wouldn't really be fair, would it?
Let's just unpack some of the language you use, like forced. No employer is going to be forced into doing it if their employees don't want to. So that's the first threshold thing. And it's the same now, right? So enterprise bargaining, every single so-called, small business, whether it be one employee or two employees or whether it be, 15 employees already has enterprise bargaining. In order to access that, and it's the same with multi-employer bargaining, workers a majority of them have got to want it. And then there's a whole process where you've got to demonstrate that. Now, let's think about these businesses we're talking about, really high turnover of workers, a lot of people in casual employment, no union membership in them, like this whole idea that somehow workers there are all going to get together, join their union, vote to, want to have these multi-employer bargains. It's just actually not reality.
They don't have to join the union though, do they? They wouldn't actually have to join the union. You just need a majority of them to be joining the action to make the employer be part of the action.
Multi-employer bargaining has to involve a union. And so in order to do multi-employer bargaining under this, so yes, actually they would. You think that unions are going to be...
Sorry, just to clarify, you wouldn't need all of those people to be joining the union. You'd need union involvement, as you point out, but you don't need all the people that support the action, so that majority, they don't need to all be members of the union, do they?
Well, no, they don't, but you just think of the practicalities of this. Unions would have to be spending time and resources, members' money, on pursuing agreements in areas with, no union members. It's just not viable. Like, we are hard pressed to do what we're doing at the moment. You're going to that point of union membership. We are not going to be doing it in areas where there's a high turnover of staff, where there's small businesses. We've never done it. We didn't even do it when we had 60% union membership. So all of these hypothetical scenarios, we've actually had a reality in our country where we might have had the capacity to do that and we didn't. We certainly don't now.
Okay, let me ask you this broadly. A lot of talk about strikes, whether this increases strikes. If this bill is passed, we do see an increase in strikes in the country. Is that the bill working or the bill failing?
It's pay rises. It's a measure, not about industrial action. And there's evidence about this from, around the world where there's multi-employer bargaining. There's not an increase in industrial action. And that's simply, and the other thing is what the government's putting forward is also a heavy role for the Industrial Relations Commission in terms of being able to settle disputes. So there's a lot that's built in there that, number one, would make it extremely hard even for workers to vote for the option of it to even get in there. And then even when they did, a role of the independent umpire to help settle it. So I just do not believe anything that's been said about that. It's all scaremongering and it's all for to change anything.
Okay, well, I understand you've got your metric of wages, that's fair enough, but I'm just asking if we do see an uptick in strikes, would you see that as the bill working or the bill failing?
No, as I said before, we would see getting wages moving as a key metric.
Right, but that's not the question.
Well, yes, it is. You asked me whether or not strike action would be like the bill working. I said no, it'd be pay rises being the bill working.
Okay. So you don't see that, right? So you don't, essentially you don't think it will. It'll see increased strikes to any great extent.
Yes, I don't believe it will. We've been clear about that all along. There's really heavy emphasis on the Commission bringing people together, and if you can't resolve it, they then step in and resolve the rest of it. So that's a very different system to what we've got now.